You know, every time you flip a switch, you are plugging into one of the most complex, most synchronized systems on the entire planet. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible world of electricity markets, the engine that's really keeping our modern lives powered up.
It all really starts with this almost unbelievable challenge. You see, unlike water or natural gas, you can't really store electricity at a massive scale. And what that means is that the amount being generated has to precisely match what's being consumed in real time across the entire grid. So how in the world is this massive balancing act even possible?
All right, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to dig into that core challenge. Then, we'll look at how the old monopoly model worked and how it compares to today's competitive marketplace. After that, we'll meet the key players who are running the system. And finally, we'll see how the whole thing is kept fair and honest.
Okay, so at its very heart, any electricity system has to do three things exceptionally well. It has to be reliable, it has to be efficient, and in today's world, it has to be competitive. That is the fundamental mandate.
So what that all boils down to is this. The system's entire job is to get power from where it's made to where it's needed, reliably and without being wasteful about it. It's just an enormous logistics problem. And over the years, we've come up with two very different ways to solve it.
Let's start by rewinding the clock a bit and looking at the classic approach, the model that basically powered the entire 20th century, the vertically integrated utility.
In this world, one single company did everything. I mean everything. They owned the power plants, they owned the giant transmission lines, and they owned the local distribution poles that ran right to your house. And since they were a monopoly, their prices weren't set by competition. Instead, they were set by regulators who would figure out what a fair cost of service was.
This right here really gets to the heart of the huge shift that happened. We went from a system with a single, regulated company controlling the whole chain to a new system where lots of different companies compete against each other, and prices are set by the constant dance of supply and demand.
So that brings us to the modern era and the massive restructuring that created the competitive marketplace we see in so many parts of the country today.
So what actually drove this big change? Well, it was a fundamental shift in thinking. The idea started to take hold that maybe electricity could be treated like any other commodity, something to be bought and sold in a competitive market. The theory was that this would drive down costs and really spur innovation.
And this table here, it really breaks down that overhaul so clearly. In the new model, the structure is unbundled. That means the companies that generate power are separate from the companies that transmit it. Prices aren't based on a company's costs anymore. They're determined by competitive bids in a market. And maybe most importantly, a new independent operator takes over the critical job of actually managing the grid.
Now, this new marketplace doesn't just trade one thing called electricity. It's actually more like three markets all rolled into one. You've got the energy market, which is for the electricity you're using right this second. Then there are capacity markets, which pay power plants just to be available for future demands, say on the hottest day of the year. And finally, you have ancillary services, which pay for all the technical little things that keep the grid stable.
So, if the old monopoly is gone, who's in charge now? Well, this new system required a whole new set of independent referees and expert players to make it all work.
The most important new players are the RTOs and ISOs. That's regional transmission organizations and independent system operators. The easiest way to think of them is like the air traffic controllers for the power grid. They don't own the planes or the airports, or in this case, the power plants or the wires, but they direct all the traffic to ensure reliability and, crucially, to make sure everyone gets fair access to the system.
And their role is absolutely massive. Just to put it in perspective, in the United States alone, these independent operators manage the power grid for about 2/3 of the entire population. That's a huge responsibility.
Okay, so if the RTO is running this big wholesale market, who's actually buying power from it on your behalf? Well, that's the job of the Load Serving Entity, or LSE. This is typically your local utility company, and they have the legal duty to go into that complex wholesale market and buy enough power to keep your lights on.
And this right here is their most critical and probably least visible function. Wholesale electricity prices can swing wildly. I mean, from one minute to the next. The LSE stands right in the middle of all that, absorbing that volatility so you don't have to. And this isn't just about your personal bill. It provides a bedrock of price stability that our entire economy really depends on.
So here's how they pull it off. They buy power at those fluctuating wholesale prices, but they use all these complex financial tools and long-term contracts to hedge their risk. And the result of all that is that they can then turn around and sell that power to you, the customer, at a stable, predictable retail price. That's exactly why your electricity bill doesn't suddenly triple on a hot summer afternoon. So here's how.
Now, anytime you create a competitive market, you get incredible efficiencies, but you also create the temptation for some players to try and bend the rules. And that's where the market's watchdog comes in.
Every single RTO has an independent market monitor, or IMM. You can think of them as the impartial referee. Their whole job is to constantly analyze market data, looking for any behavior that isn't competitive, and just making sure there's a level playing field for everyone.
And you know, the IMM's goal here is very pragmatic. They know that a perfectly competitive market is really something you only find in an economics textbook. Their real-world mission is to find and stop the abuse of market power, to prevent any single player from unfairly manipulating prices.
And this is exactly what they are on the lookout for. Market power abuse is defined as one or more suppliers having the ability to push prices way above where they should be in a fair market, and then keep them there long enough to make an unfair profit. The monitor's entire job is to prevent that from happening.
So when you put all these pieces together, the independent grid operator, the financial shock absorbers, the market watchdog, you start to see that this incredibly intricate system is a carefully constructed, constantly evolving answer to that core challenge we started with: how to deliver reliable, efficient, and fairly priced power to everyone. But that evolution, well, it's far from over. As we bring more and more variable renewables like solar and wind onto the grid, along with new resources like batteries and electric vehicles, the ultimate question still remains: is the market model we have today truly built for the grid of tomorrow?